Welcome to this week's America with an Accent. Learning or gaining fluency in English is the first goal of every immigrant. The road is not easy. Amanda Sisivan, a teacher of English as a second language with the Metropolitan Community College here in Omaha, shares some advice. This episode is specifically dedicated to Shamet Gorchari of Pennsylvania, who reached out, and to all immigrants who, just like Shamet, wonder, what is the best way to learn English? Well, thank you for being here today and talking with us.
All right, thank you for inviting me.
All right, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Do I detect a little bit of an accent?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes, I speak Spanish and Japanese too.
All right.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right, but you go to school here, right? You went to school here.
Yes. And I have a degree in business and education, and I have a master's in educational administration also, and I'm learning to become a counselor right now.
Why did you learn Spanish?
That was just that my friends and their families didn't speak English when they first came. And so they just kind of immersed me to learn the language. I kept telling them, I don't speak Spanish, but then they kept talking to me in Spanish. So I picked up some of the words, then I went to the book, and then, this is what they're saying. And then I wrote, some of the things down, and just that.
What is the easiest language for you to use, English?
Yes, of course, yeah, because I teach there, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Amanda. The question that we received, the general theme would be, what is the best way to learn English? But of course, I have developed that a little bit more, and I would like to start by a struggle that myself as an immigrant, I encountered when I landed to the United States. Should I study the language the way I studied back in my own country, the grammar, the book, the alphabet, and how you read the past tense or present tense? Or should I just immerse myself into the culture, going out, discussing, conversing, getting used to the sound of the language? What is the best way?
I would say there is no one best way to learn the language, but for your case, because you know the grammar and the reading portion of the language, to me, for your benefits, it would be for you to emerge into the culture and then speak and practice basically talking to the Americans. But for others, it really depends on the background of their education and their preferences too.
Can you develop that a little bit more, the educational background? What do you mean by that?
So if you have a formal education, if you know your language, your native language, you know how to read and write well, maybe on high school level language skills, then it'll be easier for that students to learn any other language because it's merely a translation. But if you haven't had the formal education in your language, it will be harder for that students to learn the different language because they have to start from maybe the study skills. How do I learn the language itself? Because you don't really know your native language. You might be able to speak it, but maybe you don't know the structure of the language to even make a translation into English.
And you do not suggest at this point that immigrant, let's say myself, don't know how to read and write in my own language, but I'm trying to learn English here. You do not suggest that I learn how to read and write in my own language, just in English. Is that right?
It will be really depends on what you want to learn. If you wanted to, of course, learn your language first, your native language, brush into maybe your reading and writing first, it might be a good thing to learn your own language. But if you want to learn the English, then you can. Of course, the teachers will support you to learn that, but it might be a little harder because you don't know your native language.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes. Now, you're a teacher, and we're talking about methodology here. What method do you apply in your teaching?
I use multiple methods, but the non-negotiable for a teacher, ESL teacher, is to always use 4 modes of teaching, which is reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We have to include that for each lesson that we plan.
So can you describe that? So let's say you come into the classroom and the class starts. What do you do first?
Okay, first, well, I would always have schedules written, objectives written on my board. So the students know, or hopefully some students who can read can see what we're going to be doing for that class period. So once the students come in, I will go over the schedule. So I would explain this is our objectives, so language objectives. You will be able to, or I would just say, I can, let's say, for example, I can say, I can see the difference between the present tense and the past tense, or something like that. I don't know, just throwing something. But so they know what they're going to learn for that class period. And then I would have a schedule. Usually it starts with whole group. Then we'll have small group lessons, and then we'll use the Burlington English, so they'll be on the computer when I'm working with the small group students. So
the Burlington
English
program? Okay.
Burlington English, okay.
Yeah, can you?
So that's the one that we use at Metro here.
Okay.
Each students have their own login, and they go in, and we have a theme. Of course, the teacher would tell them which lessons to go into. And each theme is designed for everyday language, of course, but like right now we're doing, for example, we started with the emergency theme, so they have the vocabulary to go with emergency situations, and they have the dialogue, and then they have the written portion of it and reading portion of that lesson that goes with the emergency. And then for the vocabulary portion, they do have to record their speaking. So they will tell you if you're speaking or pronouncing the words correctly. And then they can practice that. Multiple things that they can practice on the programs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while you are working in small groups, the rest of the class
Will be
works
working
independently, right?
Yes.
On this program. Okay. Is that all? Is there conversation during the class?
Yes. So
or do you let them hear the sound of the language?
So the
please tell me
Burlington
more?
English, like I said, if you click on them, the vocab is speaking to you, and then you have to repeat and then practice that pronunciation. And as a small group, when we get together as a small group, I would make sure that the students practice what they learned on the computer, or what I presented for the whole group. I will go over that with them. So they would have the opportunity to practice or ask questions, because each small group would consist between 3 to 5 students. So they would have opportunity to ask me without being embarrassed in front of other students. So,
Yes.
yeah.
That is a big obstacle to overcome. The courage to speak in a different language.
Yes.
Isn't it? Yes. Now, I understand that Burlington English is available online, but an old schooler here believes in books. Can you
Yes.
tell me if there is a good book that you can use to learn English? Or do you have any favorite books? You're a teacher.
Yes. For that, there's so many books, so many great books out there. So it really depends on your preferences, what you like to learn. Like there's conversational books that you can get in your language, and both bilingual books, or you can get just straight grammar books. But you kind of have to go through and then look through the books and say which one you prefer to use. But for my students, I do, if they come and ask me I would already know what kind of person the student is, so I could make better suggestions for that student.
Okay.
So like older students who only want to learn the conversational skills, there's a book for that. And then the students who really wanted to become, going to universities, they would have I would have different suggestions for that.
I know there is Google Translate.
Yes.
And things online, but I know the value of a good dictionary. Do you have a favorite dictionary?
Well, I like the Oxford Picture Dictionary.
Okay.
Yeah, for even adults, I think Picture Dictionary is always helpful, because you can easily see the picture speaks louder than the explanations, right? So I like the picture dictionary or even children's dictionary because it explains in simple synonyms for the word that you're looking for.
One other question that I have is that when I came to the United States, I realized that I knew written English very well. I know how to read. My speaking ability was good, but limited. And at that point, and I'm talking 20 years ago, I met a professor who encouraged me to write for half an hour every night.
Yes.
It didn't really matter if there was a theme or it was correct or not. Just throw your thoughts into writing. And it did help me.
Yes, I really support that. Yeah, journal writing is very good. It develops your critical thinking skills, improves your writing. Yeah, and that would support the reading, and that would support the speaking and listening skills as well.
Yeah.
I would encourage that to all of the students, not even the ESL, but the American students too, to write journals, even for adults. Critical thinking skills, I think it's very important, and journaling really helps.
Well, what is the concept that students struggle the most?
The everyday conversation that really doesn't mean much, like the idioms too, but like the students, we use a lot of different expressions, like what's up, what's going down, those kind of things that it doesn't really have meanings, but for Americans, it's a conversation every day. So it is hard for them to understand those idiom. It's not an idiom, but it's everyday conversation that doesn't really mean much. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Actually, from my experience, from my interaction with fellow immigrants, asking for direction, being able to ask for direction is wow. When you achieve that, it's a big success.
Yeah.
Or picking up the phone and answering the phone. When you call, I've noticed it's a little different because you are prepared.
Yeah.
But when you receive a phone call, this is when you're caught off guard. And sometimes, even to this day, I have to repeat. There are days that I go like, can you please repeat?
Yes.
Or who you're looking for. Although they may have introduced themselves just all right, I'm not prepared for that conversation. Do you see that among your adult students?
A lot of students prefer text messaging because then you can translate or you can ask someone. So they do not really like calling,
Text
so I noticed it.
messaging.
Yes, it's very helpful. I know I have students actually own a business, but he would never answer the phone. He would respond every time in text messaging. So for all his businesses, because then he can actually translate from his language to English, and he knows what he's responding. But he's very successful in business, but he really doesn't have much of his English abilities yet.
Well, does he do business with his fellow nationals or that come from the same country? Or
no, his clients are all American, mostly Americans, yes. But then, his crew is his native.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a story to tell you, and maybe all people, if we can. We were doing the driveway, and there comes the team. There are 4 or 5 of them, and 2 of them are brothers. And they were speaking Spanish, and I can pick some Spanish.
Okay.
I used to speak Italian, and because of that, I can pick some Spanish. So when they realized that I speak Spanish, they said, well, we need to be careful. And at one point, I see those, maybe they weren't brothers, but they were from Guatemala, and they started speaking another language.
Right.
And then I looked at the maestro. There was a guy that was doing the whole beautiful thing, and he was Mexican, and I asked him what they're saying, and he goes like, I don't know. They were speaking Mayan.
Yeah, their dialect, right? So yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think in Guatemala there's 200 some dialects there, so
there was a very specific kind of language that they were using, and no one else in the crew were able to understand.
Yeah, that's
what
very
they were
interesting.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and their Spanish is a little different from the other Central America too. So Yeah, because I don't think they learn Spanish until they go to kindergarten. So,
Is that so?
I mean, some
Interesting.
parts of Guatemala, not the whole.
Okay. Now back to our discussion. How many hours per day do you recommend to study? And I mean foreign language.
Like, again, that really depends on what your goals and your motivation levels are. But for my students, I tell them that at least 20 minutes, and not just screwing through the YouTube or watching, reading Facebook or nothing like that, but actually sit down, open the book, study, like write or read, and their levels of books. Like, I would give them their level books. I wouldn't just give them whatever books. If they're reading a level D or F, then I'm not going to give them H books. I'm going to give them their leveled book, and then I'll tell them to read it, reread them, and then write what you think about it or what you learned from a book. So, but they have to do it at least 20 minutes a day.
And when we say book, this is not English learning, it's just featured books, right?
Well, we have an A through Z book that I use, and then it's a leveled book, depending on the student. So
it's novel books, right?
It's kind of like a,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move now to some general advice. Let's say an immigrant arrives to the United States. He has no knowledge or a little bit of knowledge of English. What would be your advice? What is the first thing that immigrant should do?
Usually, we do have students like that. I would go through the picture cards with the vocabulary in the back, and then usually most of the language is translated, so we'll just go through the pictures and learn the nouns and the verbs. I think those are the very important part of the language. And of course, the conversational skills, good morning, good afternoon, days of the week, and things like that. But
can they do that independently, or they need to be enrolled?
Well, yeah, for independent learning, I would just say, like, picture dictionary. Just go through the themes, like the kitchen, vocab, or if you work in the restaurant, maybe you go through those pictures.
And how about here? What's the rule in your institution? Can everyone enroll in your institution?
Oh, yes, anybody can come to Metro. We have the levels from 0 language to advanced English speakers who wants to go into college. So we have 7 levels, I think, for ESL alone. So, yeah. And then Burlington English, yes, like the program is designed for 0 language skill person to advanced person who's into the career. So Burlington would help the students who has no knowledge of English too, because they have supports in native language in that program.
And how much is their tuition? What do they pay
for Metro, it is free. Everything is free. So
immigrants?
Yes. Anyone can come in. Yes, any age. But I think you have to be 18. I'm sorry, not any age, but yeah, 18 and up.
Okay.
You could be a grandma. You can be a great grandma. You're welcome to come. And then we have tutoring services. It's free. Conversational services for free. I mean, everything. You will be successful. If you really want to learn the language, come to Metro.
When it is conversational sessions, what is that?
We have conversational partners every day, I think, of the week. I do that on Saturdays. So students can come anytime between 9 to 1. Just come and talk to me. And then if you're non-speaker, I'll change my conversation skill to accommodate the students. And then if you are advanced students, I will be able to talk topics that the students would like to talk about.
Now, as I said, you are an elementary school teacher, and at the same time you teach adults as part of the Metropolitan Community College. What is the main difference between teaching little kids and teaching adults?
The main difference is, of course, the motivational levels. The adult students are motivated, they really want to learn. But the time constraint is the big thing, because they have a responsibility for the family. They have to go to work every day. So, they really don't have the time like the elementary students. So that makes it difficult for them, yeah.
And now I'm a foreigner and I'm an immigrant, and of course I've read about the fluency and the gaining control of the language, and and I don't dream, I will never be able to have a full grasp of the English language, but how long, if there is a number, how long does it usually take for a foreigner to become fluent in a different language, or in English in this case?
Yeah. Like I said, I think it really depends on your educational background, because I see students that become fluent and understand all the language, grasp the language in 3 years, or maybe less than 3 years. Maybe they did learn the English in their country, home, countries too. But the students, but I think the statistics says about 3 to 5 years for fluency, or maybe 5 to 7 years. But then for academic language, it could take over 10 years, I think. It really depends on the students.
On the student. So if, let's say you have 2 adult students, and they both are educated in their own countries. They have a good control of their own languages. However, the speed of learning a different language is different. Why is it so? Is there a biological component to that, or?
Well, I think motivational levels, I think, if they really want to. And then we have students, I've seen many students, how they learn differently. I have students who likes to listen to music, and then they would translate the language. They would write it in English, try to write it in English from listening, and then they'll translate it to their language so then they can understand what they're listening. So those are students that actually learn quick for speaking part of it. But then like the music here in the US, the grammar is terrible. So I don't know, depends on what music you're listening to, but those students can learn quickly for speaking. A lot of students who uses music. But
okay. And I also, nowadays, you are an immigrant, you moved to the United States, but yet again, access to the media from your own native country is so easy.
yes.
And I encountered that among my immigrant fellows, that we tend to listen to the media of our own countries or countries of origin. How damaging and how profiting that or benefiting that is.
Well, I think it really depends, but for adults who want to learn English, they probably should start watching things in English, CNN or something like that. But for like little children, maybe they should watch it in their parents' language so they can actually become fluent bilingual, students. But yeah, it really depends. But for adults that's been here 10 years, 15 years, still struggle to learn the language, they should be starting to maybe watch English programs.
And to an adult like just you referred to that has been trying for 10 years, 12 years, still not there, still not being able to speak fluently and get discouraged, what is your advice?
Maybe they should try something different way of learning. There's a different learning styles and different things. Maybe what they tried wasn't working. So maybe they can talk to the teachers. Teachers can suggest different way of learning. So I think they need to talk to somebody about that. Yeah. Like at Metro, we have a lot of, like I said, a lot of programs available for them, computer, conversation, tutoring. So there is no way that somebody can't be successful in learning the language.
Well, when you're a native speaker of English, it's easy to say, but as a foreigner, it is a struggle. And I remember that I thought I knew English, but then when I came over, the sound of the language was completely new to me. The everyday language was completely new to me. I found myself that if I throw myself out there, not caring about mistakes, I give myself a shot to get better into English. What your advice would be?
Yes, that is very true. I think, you just don't be afraid to make mistakes. Americans don't speak perfect English either, so you should be don't be afraid to speak up and talk to people. I say that to my students all the time. This is a safe environment for them to learn, so they should just speak up and say whenever they have questions, they need to ask.
Yeah.
But it is hard for them. I
Yeah.
can see that.
Well, I mean, to be part of an organization, it's easy for someone who can speak the language, but to someone that it doesn't, I mean, even volunteering may become difficult, but in my opinion, it has helped me expose myself to the sound of the language and little by little pick up my ability to express myself in English.
Yes.
So volunteering could
Yeah,
be
volunteering is going to be a very good.
very good. Any other advice?
Well, make American friends, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Involved in church organization or, your religious organizations is helpful too. But I know that they have their own cultural religious groups, but maybe they can step into American, same religion but different.
Okay.
I mean, American church or American mosque or something.
so one more thing, and this attaches to the first part of the interview, but among those 4 modes that you mentioned, which one has the biggest weight?
You mean the reading,
Learn,
writing,
yeah.
speaking, and listening? For me, my opinion is writing. You have to write and read, and that would support the speaking and comprehension part of it. I think you need to be writing and reading every day.
Dear Andy, greetings from Omaha. Today's topic of the program, the best way to learn English, triggered reflection in me. First of all, thanks Andy for your patience and not making fun of my mistakes, which are plentiful, I must add. I'm encouraged. However, a few days back, a family conversation made me think whether our choice to immigrate is the best for our kids. Our 12-year-old son has entered an interesting phase in his life, tons of reflections, and one day came back home from school with a realization. My English vocabulary, he said, is not as rich as that of my friends. We both parents, none of us native speakers, said that this is to be expected and poured on benefits of being raised by foreign-born parents. Exposure to our languages help your brain develop differently biologically. The speed of association process up in your brain is like that of a race car. Indirectly, the individuals like you have a much more developed sense of adaptation and are generally more accepting of the others. And we kept going. I wondered that evening if we zealously displayed the benefits because we unconsciously fear that our sons will never be the same as their friends who are raised by native speakers, to hide that small degree of insecurity we live with every day because we lack full control of English, to fight the thought that one day our kids may judge our decision to produce life in a country that we will never belong 100%. Guys, I said, it is time to go to bed. No guys as in ice, but guys as in disguise, said our youngest. Okay, got to admit, we have pretty funny lives. I hope this letter finds you well, Andy. Till next time. En Kayla. This was America with an Accent for this week. I hope to see you again next Monday here on KPAO or online at www.newamericansmedia.com. I am Enkela Belio.